the DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, the #1 sports information program in America, the Breakfast Bankroll, with your host, the sports broker, Jeff Dawson.
Good morning, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your Breakfast Bankroll for Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. I said March 1st. I don't know where the time went, but this morning, you see the smile? Smiling from ear to ear. Special guest, had an opportunity to exchange some texts and DMs. And when we had a small window to bring him on, it just cleared the desk. And we couldn't be happier, prouder, and more honored. So without further ado, let's bring him in, the one and only Mr. Brady Kannon.
Jeff, how are you, my friend? And quite a nice introduction there. And it's really an honor to be on with you. I've been a fan of your show for a long time, and here we are finally connecting. So thank you for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. March 1st, in my eyes, means 1 week closer to Augusta. I know there's a lot of golf, but just something about when we get to April, and then next thing you know, it's the Final Four. It's the championship game on Monday. MLB has started, and then the Masters just 2 weeks away.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I wrote for golf.com this week, my weekly article with them. We have these elevated events now on the PGA Tour, which are fantastic. You know, you get these loaded fields with all the top players in the world. And we had back-to-back elevated events with the Phoenix Open and the Genesis Invitational. And then we had the Honda Classic, of course, last week, a watered down field there. But now we go to Bay Hill, and coming up next week is the Players Championship. So a back-to-back loaded field on the PGA Tour once again. And we have flipped the calendar to March. So some madness in the world of golf likely to take place as well over the next few weeks. And then, of course, the first week in April, we head down Magnolia Lane for the first major of the season, which is always just, the build up to the Masters, Jeff. And it falls in line with, kind of the change of the season and ushering in the spring season and all the flowers there in the azaleas at Augusta. It's a rite of spring, is the Masters, and, a change in the calendar, a change in the season, and kind of a change in a sports fan's landscape when you turn on that TV and you kind of see the change in the color away from the dreary days of winter and what have you.
Well, there's two guarantees. One, I get the email for the Masters every year for tickets. And number two, thanks, Mr. Dawson, but unfortunately, we don't have tickets for you.
Yeah, I've gotten a few of those for sure.
An amazing lineup. I was reading your article. Great work as always. 44 of the top 50 playing. I want to start with this, Brady, before we break this down. Last year, Rahm was absolutely fabulous. The only problem is he couldn't putt. And that's all we heard about was Rory and Scheffler. And I think he sat here off season and said, you know what? I've had enough of this BS. And he's just come onto the scene like no tomorrow, like the true Raminator that he is.
Oh, he's been fantastic. I mean, what is it? 3 out of his last 5 starts that he's won. Certainly the rightful #1 player in the world right now. And it seems like just every week it's between he and Rory and Scheffler. Whoever wins is going to move back into that #1 spot. And I think you can make an argument for any of the 3. But you're right. Rahm is certainly the hottest right now. It will be interesting. you kind of go through some changes here for different parts of the country, different types of grasses that they're playing on. We saw the California swing, and it was dominated by John Rahm, also won in Hawaii. And then Max Homa, a real California kid who won at Torrey Pines and nearly backed it up with another win at the Genesis Invitational. But now we shift over to Florida. Patrick Cantlay is another guy that's had a lot of great success on the West Coast, Pebble Beach, the Genesis, what have you. But now we go over to Florida, and John Rahm, Max Homa, Patrick Cantlay, the California kids, are they really going to have the same success on that Bermuda grass in the different weather, the wind, the humidity? Now, Rory McIlroy is kind of an opposite of that. He hasn't had as much success as those guys in California, hasn't played as much as those guys on the West Coast swing, but now he's kind of on his home turf. So let's see how Rory does now. Of course, he's won at Bay Hill. He's won at TPC Sawgrass. So it's interesting how these guys fare in different parts of the country, different turf species and what have you. And, it'd be interesting if maybe John Rahm and Max Homa fall off a little bit on the California swing, and maybe it's Rory's turn.
As you're putting together your card, outright winners, pre-flop, top 20s, head-to-head matchups, is it horses for courses, as our friend Dubsy likes to say? Is it more than numbers? I was looking at Circa before we went live, and there's certain numbers when Morikawa, when Hovland, when JT get to these outrageous numbers, 25, 30 to 1, they're almost like auto plays for me. How do you formulate your card?
Well, a little bit of all of that, really. It started years ago for me, probably in the late 90s. I started playing in like fantasy golf leagues where you had to pick a golfer. There were roughly some 40 tournaments. And before the season started, you had to pick a winner for all 40 tournaments. It wasn't like the modern day fantasy where we have kind of a one and done and you get to pick week to week. We had to lay out our whole card before the season started. So you really had to figure out who the horses for courses were, who was going to show up at certain tournaments, who had success at these tournaments in the past. So that really gave me my initial education on who typically plays well at which tracks. And then, you fast forward another 10 years and you dive into the golf betting even more so, or at least I did. And you start to take in analytics and, now the shot gained, strokes gained technology is so advanced. Even on the PGA Tour website, they've upgraded that where you can really get a lot of information. So, and then the market, of course, market reading as well. Like you allude to, if you ever see Justin Thomas at 30 to 1, it's probably an auto bet. And I remember my colleagues on long shots. Of course, you were familiar with our show on VSiN long shots, Wes Reynolds and Matt Humans. It was that exact same scenario a couple of years ago when Justin Thomas drifted to 25 to 1 to win the Players Championship. And they're like, you know what? I got to take JT at that number. Sure enough, he won. So you're right. It's a combination. You know how it is in any sport, football, basketball, baseball, golf, what have you. There's horses for courses, there's trends, there's course history, there's metrics, and then there's the market reading as well. So I think as you become more advanced as a bettor, you're looking at all those different areas.
Yeah, the three leaders this week, obviously Rahm, I think at plus 650, then Rory around plus 800, and Scheffler. And then after that, you're looking at around plus 2,000s with such a star-studded field, 120 golfers. Is that value on those top three? There's no value there, or can you make a reason why you would have to play Rahm, Rory, or Scheffler this week?
Well, it's tough. And I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Do those guys deserve to be single digits? Yes. Do you want to bet on them? Probably not. I mean, it costs you a lot of money to make a little at 6 to 1, 7 to 1, 8 to 1. If I had to play any of them, Jeff, I can't remember the last time I ever played a guy in a tournament less than double digits. I did play Rory McIlroy at a little bit better than 10-1 at the Genesis. That didn't work out. I basically had to decide between he and Rahm, and obviously Rahm was the winner. I chose the wrong guy. The Masters is another tournament where you get such a stacked field. We know the history of the Masters, where it's typically someone in the top 30 or so that wins. You don't get many long shots that win at Augusta. That's another tournament where I think you're okay looking at somebody that's as low as 10 or 12-1. In fact, I already have a bet on Rory McIlroy for the Masters at 12-1. That number is no longer available, and maybe it'll come back, but I doubt it. He's obviously a top player in the world, always has been, but he's a top 3 player in the world, if not number 1 now. And he's down, I think I've seen as low as 9-1 to win the Masters. But the point is, for the Masters, I think that's one tournament certainly where you can look at possibly single digits. But if for this week at Bay Hill, if I was going to bet any of those 3 guys, I'd go with the only double digit left, and that would be Scotty Scheffler. But, is a guy really going to defend his title and go back to back? Well, he did in Phoenix. And you remember last year, those 2 courses are correlated, in my opinion, as well. The way the layouts are, the way they set up, long par 4s, long par 3s, what have you. Bay Hill and TPC Scottsdale are not too dissimilar. So you look at players that have done well at both courses, and I think that can lead you to some answers this week. And of course, Scotty Scheffler last year won at both Bay Hill and TPC Scottsdale. Will he pull it off again this year? I tend to doubt it. So I went a little further down the board. We talked about Rahm being so successful on the West Coast. Will that carry over into Florida? I'm not so sure. Rory McIlroy might not be such a bad play this week because we talked about he not having as much success in California, but more so in Florida. So any of those short shots, I'd probably only take the double digits with Scotty, but maybe Rory's the guy.
All right, I'm going to give you a soft lob or wedge shot here to go through your board, your top 5 selections, some leans, some numbers that you already got in pocket. We got a lot of people watching and listening as we speak, kind of chomping at the bit on how you see this breaking down.
Well, it's a very difficult golf course, Jeff, and that's really changed in the last 3 years. Arnold Palmer was famous for always tinkering with his clubs and his swing. He was just always working on stuff and never felt that he had it just right. And of course, Mr. Palmer has since passed, but the tinkering of this golf course has not changed. Arnie did it when he was still alive, and now it's carried over with the new regime. And we've seen that really flip in the last 3 versions of the Bay Hill or the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill. You recall we go back, 10, 15 years ago, guys, and Tiger, of course, dominated this event, won 8 times, and he was doing it to the tune of 15, 18 under par. There were other guys, 14, 15, 18 under par. Rory McIlroy not too long ago won, I believe, at 18 under par. Well, it's changed. The last 3 years, your winners are -5, -4, and 11 under par. Bryson DeChambeau at 11 under par was the lowest score just a few years ago. But in the last 3 years, Bay Hill has really become even tougher. Now, they've widened the fairways a little bit, but they've also made them longer, and they've grown the rough up. This is as close to what we'll see for U.S. Open rough on a regular PGA Tour scheduled event, really outside of the major championships. And one interesting note, I saw some quotes from what the superintendent has done at Bay Hill to make this course even more difficult. Around the bunkers, around the greens, around the water hazards, he's removed some of the rough. So while the bordering rough on the fairways is really thick, there has been some rough removed as far as like entryways into the hazards. So, your ball can run out and not be backstopped, if you will, by the rough, and rather it's going to fall into that water hazard, sand bunker, what have you. So that adds some difficulty to the course. A really interesting nuance there, the way they have kind of, again, tinkered with this to make it more difficult. But this is going to be a very stern test. And then, typically on the Florida swing, Jeff, we always have weather too. We didn't have it last week at the Honda Classic, which was really wild. I mean, on Sunday, the wind was hardly blowing at all. It was like 4 miles an hour. And it really never showed up in any of the 4 days at the Honda. But we are supposed to get it for a couple days here in Orlando. Thursday looks to be calm. Sunday looks to be calm. But Friday and Saturday, you could have steady breezes, 15 to 20, and even gusts around 30 miles an hour. So I think those 2 days are going to be very interesting. And of course, Friday, I think a lot is going to be on the line when they make the cut there. And these guys are trying to battle some pretty brutal winds.
I'm looking at your article here. Funny that you have here. Willie Z, Patrick Cantlay, Jason Day, Sung J M, a long shot, Brian Harmon. How did you come down with the?
Well, Willie Z was actually one of the first players that came to mind for me. I was on Sports Grid Radio last Sunday evening, recapping the Honda and looking ahead to Bay Hill. And they said, well, who are some of your initial thoughts? And the first two guys that came to mind were Victor Hovland and Willie Z. Victor Hovland did not end up making my card, but I'm not ruling him out. Certainly he can win. I think a top 20 bet on Victor Hovland could be a good play, but Willie Z just seems perfect for this golf course. He's one of those guys that drives it really far. I looked at strokes gained off the tee on long courses. He's very good in that regard. We know he's an elite iron player. And, his putting has really improved. We remember watching the PGA Championship and a lot of other tournaments with Zalatoris where he was missing a lot of crucial putts. Not so much the case anymore. He is actually, over the last 36 rounds, 35th in this field for strokes gained putting. So, I mean, if Will Zalatoris can putt, look out. And I felt I got a pretty decent number at him at 22-1. I've seen as low as 17 now on Zalatoris. And actually on the Open, I expected him to be higher than 22 or 25. With such a loaded field, I expected him to be closer to 30, but I settled for 22, which I'm okay with. Patrick Cantlay is another guy I grabbed at 23-1. Cantlay is a guy that does everything well. He doesn't have hardly a weakness in his game. He chips well. He scrambles well. He putts well. Total driving. He's long and accurate. One of the key statistics for Bay Hill, Jeff, we have 4 par 3s that are all 200 yards or better. And so that really contributes to the fact that you have a ton of approach shots that are 200 yards or greater on this golf course. The most of any PGA Tour course we see all season, shots into the green of 200 yards or greater. And Patrick Cantlay ranks in the top 30 on the PGA Tour for approach shots, proximity to the hole, how close to the hole he's getting it on those approach shots of 200 yards or more. Sungjae Im is another guy that falls into that category, John Rahm. So that's a really telling statistic here at Bay Hill. Over the last 11 tournaments, 10 of the 11 winners have ranked in the top 55 on tour for proximity to the hole from 200 yards or greater. So that's one stat you can look at right off the bat. Another one is par 5 scoring. There aren't a lot of birdie opportunities at this golf course, so you've got to take advantage of the par 5s. Patrick Cantlay, number 2 on tour in par 5 scoring, and he's number 1 on tour in par 4 scoring. Now, we talked about it early in the show. Can this California kid translate or transition over to Florida? That's the only thing that really worries me about Cantlay. He's never played Bay Hill before. Bay Hill is also a course where course history is very strong. Augusta National is the number 1 course that these players play every year, where course history tends to hold up year in and year out. If the guys play there 1 year, they typically do year in and year out. Bay Hill is another course like that. We don't have any history on Cantlay because he's never been there before, but I had to trust the numbers and what he's been doing. He comes off of a very good tournament at the Genesis Invitational, where he really challenged John Rahm and Max Homa. So despite the lack of history, we talk about the different areas we look at in terms of making a bet. This one was more on metrics for me, and certainly not a horse for the course. We don't know if he's a horse for the course just yet with Patrick Cantlay. I mentioned Sun J.M. and the statistics from 200 yards or greater, another guy that checks that box, and another guy like Cantlay that does everything well. He probably his weakest thing is putting, but he's still a top 75 guy in strokes gained putting on the PGA Tour. He scrambles well. He's a great ball striker. He's very good off the tee. He's got distance off the tee, and he does have course history here. In 4 trips, he's never missed the cut, and he's never finished outside of the top 25. He's got a 20th, a 21st, and 2 third-place finishes. He's really kind of a Florida specialist, is Sun J.M. He's got a pretty short career. He's only been around for about 4 years or so, and he already has 5 top 10 finishes in the state of Florida. So Sun J.M. was another guy I went with at 35-1. And then I went with an elder statesman, and we've seen some elder statesmen win on tour this year, including Justin Rose at Pebble Beach. Maybe it's time for Jason Day to dial it back up, a 2016 winner here at Bay Hill. I mentioned TPC Scottsdale as a correlated course. He just finished 5th there a few weeks ago. Quail Hollow, where they play the Wells Fargo Invitational, or the Wells Fargo Championship, rather, I figured was another correlated course. Jason Day has won there in the past. And, he's really sneaking up on us, Jeff. In the last 5 minutes, this guy has been playing, or last 5 months, rather, this guy has been playing some spectacular golf. And Southern Hills, where they had the PGA Championship last May in Oklahoma, that was another correlated course for me. Now, the transition hadn't quite started for Jason Day, but it was a little bit of a sign. He made the cut there and finished 55th. And now what we've seen him do in the 2022-2023 season, he's played in 10 events. He's missed 2 cuts, but in the other 8 events, he's never finished worse than 21st. And he's got 3 straight top 10 finishes coming in. Maybe the return of Jason Day is happening here. And like I say, kind of sneaking up on us. He did well at Torrey Pines, where he's won at in the past. And we always have known that Jason Day has had a great short game. And what has really kind of escaped him during his downturn before this resurgence was off the tee. He really had a lack of accuracy off the tee. Well, now the accuracy is returned. This guy's total driving has been excellent, which is a combination of length and accuracy off the tee. Ball striking, it's really all coming together for Jason Day. So I was trying to decide really between he and Victor Hovland and Tony Finau. And I talked about how the course history is so strong at Bay Hill. Jason Day, a former winner who's had other top 10 finishes here at Arnold Palmer's Invitational. So I went with Day and got him at 33-1. And then you mentioned Brian Harman, the long shot. It's very interesting. If you look at the top 26 players in the world, 15 of them here in this field are priced at 35-1 or lower. Brian Harman is the 24th player in the world, 24th ranked player in the world, and he's at 120, 125, 120-1 or better. And I think, people just kind of categorize him as a short hitter with a great short game, and he can't win on a long track. And maybe that's going to be true, but this guy is absolutely a world-class player. And I feel if you can do 2 out of 3 things well this week, there's off the tee, there's iron play, and there's short game. And if you can be elite in 2 out of those 3 areas this week, you're going to have a shot. We know Harman has the short game. And if you look at the numbers, he actually might surprise you as far as off the tee and his iron play. He's really good in par 4 scoring. He does actually really well in strokes gained off the tee and long courses. He's been very good on difficult courses with long rough. This guy tends to play well at tough tracks. He finished top 35 at Southern Hills in the PGA Championship. So is he going to win it? I don't know. But I think a top 20 finish is pretty likely or reasonable for Brian Harman. And that might surprise some people as one of the kind of shorter knockers on tour. Another guy here that might fare well on Bermuda grass because we know he's a Georgia Bulldog and it's used to that type of surface. So this may fit his game, the Florida swing for Brian Harman.
I was at the I'm showing that my backdrop is Brookline. They're the U.S. Open there, and I was there on one of the practice days.
We should have picked Matthew Fitzpatrick.
Oh, and we were at a day. It was nice in the morning. You could walk around, no problem. In the afternoon, it just got swamped. But I was right behind Brian from a tee shot. I didn't even recognize him. I mean, small, compact, and just hitting bombs. And I was
Yeah.
really impressed. Before I let you go, I have to ask you one more question. I was looking at the Circa app, and Justin Thomas is plus 2,900. Is it tempting to put a little something when it gets to that price at Circa?
Well, I would probably check a top 20 market.
Okay.
JT has just been a little bit off the boil, and I'm sure it's going to come around at some point. I don't think he's going to have a miserable season. I would imagine he's going to win a tournament at some point. I mean, he's that good of a player, and he'll figure it out. But he hasn't quite yet. And now again, we shift from the West Coast swing to Florida. Maybe that will, spark some life into his game. But I'm not ready to dive in just yet. Now, if he has a bad week this week, or maybe he shows a few signs even, and we still are able to get a good price at him next week at TPC Sawgrass, where of course he's won recently, then I might dive in. But he doesn't have a tremendous history here. Is he a great U.S. Open player? We haven't necessarily seen that in the past. No, he's won at Quail Hollow, a correlated course that I mentioned. He won the PGA Championship there at Quail Hollow. So, JT's a guy you can never count out, but I'm just not ready to dive in just yet. I would say if we go into next week and he's in the 30s, then yeah, you might have to really take a hard look, because no matter how a guy's playing, I mean, unless he's just god awful, we know JT has the game. He has not been god awful. He's close. And if you're able to get a price in the 30s, then I would say that's probably worth a small poke.
Brady, the scroll has been going the whole time. Everyone can follow you on Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer, at golf_com. Can you tell everyone where else they might be able to find your work and where they should be looking?
Yeah, absolutely. Las Vegas Golfer on Twitter. You can also find my work, a weekly column at golf.com. And hopefully next week, I'll be writing a column for the PGA Tour as well. Their Twitter handle, their golf betting division, their Twitter handle is at GolfBet. So hopefully some of my work will be available there as soon as next week as well. And then doing 3 weekly appearances on Sports Grid Radio as well. I'll be on a little later today in the neighborhood of 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific to preview the Bay Hill once again. And then over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday to kind of talk in-game, if you will, on Sports Grid Radio as well.
Well, we can't thank you enough, and it was well worth the price of admission here. Just your knowledge and your track record, your resume is second to none, and we look forward to hopefully many more appearances.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's really been a pleasure and a long time coming that we've been able to get together. We have so many mutual friends, so nice here to do it on a show together. Before I leave you, I'll give you 3 head-to-head matchups that I went with this week. And, the outrights are fun. That's where all the glory is, hitting a 30-1 shot, a 50-1 shot, right? But really, and you probably know this, Jeff, in golf betting, your best chance to turn a profit is the head-to-head matchups. That is the lowest hold percentage market. First round leader, the outrights, top 20, all of that is a greater hold percentage for the book. The head-to-head matchups have the lowest hold percentage for the odds maker. And I went with 3 this week. I took Tyrrell Hatton minus 135 over Jordan Spieth, Scotty Scheffler plus 110 over John Rahm. And then my final matchup was Patrick Cantlay minus 125 over the aforementioned Justin Thomas.
Got them. They will be added to the portfolio as soon as we stop here. So again, Brady, thank you so much. Look forward to catching you on Sports Grid. I have 3 TVs right here, one right through the window, and it's locked on Sports Grid. And as you said, we have a lot of friends and colleagues in these lanes. Special shout out and thanks to the mayor of Vegas, Mr. Dave Sharapan, for connecting us. And I should be out there on the 20th of March for a couple weeks, and make sure lunch is on me, Brady.
Sounds great, my friend. Thanks again.
Thank you. The one and only Brady Kannon. Go follow him at Las Vegas Golf at golf_com. ECSI will be back later this afternoon with the closing bell. See you soon.